Hey folks, here with another edition of Outro, the show about shows. And as people who've been in this channel and people who've watched know, this is a very tiny little show, minuscule little show about doing interviews on shows. That's the whole point of the show. If you're not aware of it, if you haven't seen it, welcome. Won't last. Episodes are only a few minutes, so they don't last long. After all, I'm talking about having done interviews on shows. My most recent interview was, let me see, last week. I was on a show called I Protest with the host Jeffries. Interesting title, right? I was talking about Maui again, the Maui fires. So, interesting episode. I think it was a good, solid. I thought it was a good, solid interview. Seemed to be a lot of. I was on YouTube, so I wasn't. Because I was on Streamyard, I wasn't taping it on Zoom, or I wasn't on the radio. So there was a lot. There were a lot of questions from people in the chat and so forth. And so it was kind of interesting. I hadn't done a YouTube show since earlier this year when I was on, I think it was another Nerdy Cast. It was a good interview. If you haven't seen that one, check that out. But we talked about, of course, what they call it, the Maui disaster, and one of the things that I mentioned in the interview, and I advise you to check it out. Is the name of the show is I Protest, and the host is Donald Jeffries. He's an author. One of the things I brought out is what I call the Miranda rule of politics, which is that when you're aware of what's going on with these politicians on the island of Maui, county government officials, the Miranda rule of politics, as I have found it, to is the fact that when you're a politician, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of public opinion. And I've seen this with politicians I've interviewed in the past when I was a reporter. I've seen it with officials I've talked to when I was a journalist. I've seen it in covering elections. I've seen this kind of thing crop up, and it's protection. And I think that's what's partly going on in terms of lack of response, lack of details, lack of information. And of course, I made the point in the interview, as I will. I don't know how many interviews I'll give about Maui, but as I will in any interview, that one, the people there deserve to know the basic amounts of information. Unfortunately, will they get it? I don't know. Because you have these ongoing investigations, including the third party investigation that's the state gave over, I think, Foundation. So that one, I think you have some other investigations going on. I know that the HECO, which is the Hawaiian Electric, the utility here in Hawaii, was on Capitol Hill recently. I think there were representatives went to Capitol Hill to testify in a hearing, I think, about the fires. So when these investigations will end and when you'll see reports, quite some time. And still, there isn't really enough information. When I say information, I don't mean information about maybe two or three things. I'm talking about several things, several aspects that are still unanswered. What was the composition of the fire? Um, you know, who was making decisions in the emergency, operations center on Maui, since the head of MEMA, which is the Maui Emergency Management Agency, was on Oahu, here on Oahu, and at a conference. You know, um, why were cops setting up barricades on places like Bypass Road, um, and having people apparently head into Lahaina and of course Front Street instead of out of Front Street, directing them out of Front Street. There's still a lot of questions that are not answered, and a lot of basic information that people don't have. And I think they need the basics, and the core basics that we have at this point are the positions. We know Eagles' position is that their power lines might have caused, or likely caused a fire in the morning, and that, but the afternoon, they say they're not responsible for the afternoon because their lines were de-energized, according to them. So we've got to look at. So there's still a lot of unanswered questions. Like I said, it was a good interview. I think because I was on YouTube, it had been the last time I was on a YouTube show was I think February. So it's been several months since I've been on a YouTube show. So it was good to be on a YouTube show, YouTube talk show, a number of questions. With something like this, I actually prefer dealing with questions because I never talk to other people. And in terms of phone in, I've done maybe one or two of those in the years that I've been on talk shows. So, again, I Protest. The host is Donald Jeffries. Check it out. It's on YouTube. And check that episode out. Again, this has been Outro, and that's my outro. Thanks for watching.